What's up guys, Tim Rustwick here, and today I wanted to talk about mechanics first design. This is going to directly contradict another video, well, probably multiple videos that I've made about theme and about integrating art and sound and theme and all that into your games and design. And I like to present different opinions sometimes, and I've noticed too that sometimes different things are correct at different times. Sometimes different things are right for different people. So I've kind of been through an evolution of thinking, and I still kind of think both ways depending on the game. On one side, I think, okay, you should build a game around your theme. You should really integrate it. But the other side, which we're going to talk about today, is how you should completely remove your theme and your art style and your music and everything from the core mechanic. So the reason why this is important, because when I got back into game development, it's probably 2 or 3 years ago when I really got back into it. I spent about a year making nothing but prototypes, just a ton of different prototypes. I have an entire folder full of them. Right now in that folder, there's probably anywhere between 50 and 100 random little prototypes. Stuff that I spent anywhere from a couple hours to a couple days on, and it's just basic mechanics. It's all basic shapes. It's all basic everything. And any kind of mobile game mechanic that I could come up with, I would just test out. I would build. And out of those 50 or 100 or so prototypes came about, I want to say 6 to 10 actual games, and then 8 of those games we actually finished for Finish Friday in 8 weeks in a row, and it was a lot of fun. But what I learned in the prototype phase, because I never really talked about this, I always talk about finishing a lot. I always talk about the end, how to push past that. But in the beginning, I found that isolating any kind of theme or any kind of music from actually designing mechanics can be beneficial to the mechanics. Now, when I'm talking about this, I'm specifically talking about single mechanic mobile games, like some really simplistic, some really basic minimalistic styles that we're seeing in mobile games today, just like high score based games usually. This, I don't know if this will apply to bigger games because I haven't tried it on bigger games, to be honest. But with the single mechanic mobile games, one of the things that I realized was that adding in art and adding in sound and adding in themes, and actually if you go back through the Finish Friday videos, you'll see this on especially some of the later games that didn't have any of that. When we added all that in, it was just like, whoa. I've noticed that when I add that stuff in, it can completely cover any flaws in the mechanics and the design. Once the game looks good, once it starts looking good and sounding good and feeling good, it can completely start to cover up all the little holes. And you don't judge it anymore based on the mechanic. You judge it on all the other things. And then when you show it to people, they judge it on all the stimuli. And you can lose that ability to kind of judge a mechanic based solely on the mechanic. And one of the great ways that I've figured that out is when I was doing all these prototypes, when I was just building these cubes and circles kind of prototypes and basic little things. Like seriously, like when I say basic, I mean super basic. I mean like you drag a cube on the screen, or you pull it like Angry Birds style, or you swing and tap, and just I was just really the bare minimum mechanic is what I was designing. And when I had those shapes there, I was really able to be critical, and I got the clarity I needed to kind of build the mechanic the right way. And I spent a lot of time tweaking the numbers, right? Like I would get it working. Like I had this game where it's kind of like an endless vertical runner in a way, but there's magnets that come scrolling down on the sides, and you have to tap the magnets, and then they pull the little player character towards them. And it's physics based, so the character falls down, and you kind of have to tap the magnets on either side to bring the player character up. And then if you let go at a certain time, the trajectory keeps going, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of like playing hot potato kind of thing, but with magnets. And that game was really interesting to try and prototype, and I built it all the way out. But the majority of time spending on the prototype was just tweaking numbers, tweaking physics, tweaking the weight of the object, the power of the magnets, all that stuff. And when I finally got it like working, I was like, okay, this is great. This is what this mechanic should be. And when I started putting in the art, then it all came together. Then it made sense. Okay, now there's a visual cue to the magnet. And I never actually finished that game. Maybe we got another Finish Friday on our hands. But I remember that being like, okay, because I built a similar game and I started with the art. I started with all that stuff, and it just was not at all. It didn't come together. It didn't feel right. Like Rocket Redneck was one of those games that we started with the art, and as that was like the first game that I had ever really finished outside of Game Jam games. And that game, it's on the App Store right now. You can play it. I'm not happy with that game. I'm not happy with it at all. And we integrated the art, and because the art looks so good, because I worked with an amazing artist, a really amazing artist, the art looks so good that I think it masks some of the problems with the mechanic. And you play the game and it feels good most of the time, but sometimes it gets janky and you don't really know what, but like the player animates correctly and the force shows correctly and the screen shows everything correctly and it looks beautiful and it looks pretty, and because of that you can lose like the sense of what's wrong or why it's weird or what's like the problem with it. I hope I'm getting my point across, because I don't know if I'm being as specific as I need to be, but basically the point is, when you have basic mechanics with squares and circles and you strip everything else away, you can really refine the mechanic and make sure that the mechanic by itself is fun. Just the mechanic by itself. And once you get to that point, then you can add in art and theme and story and sound and all that stuff. And that makes it even better. Because when you add all that stuff on top of a great mechanic, it becomes fantastic. Whereas when you kind of start with all that, I think sometimes some of the great art or some of the great music can kind of cover up some of the core problems with the mechanic. So that's my thoughts. I know it's contradictory to some of the other stuff I said, but like I said, I like to present multiple views, and I've experienced multiple sides, so I figured I would share it with you guys. But once again, if you like this video, hit the like button, leave me a comment, let me know if you've tried this either way, if you started with the theme and the story and all that stuff and you built a game around that, or you started with the mechanic and then you added all that stuff on top of it. Let me know what process you think is better. My name is Tim Ruswick, and I'll see you again tomorrow.